What's up, y'all? This is Vic Mensa, and you're now watching Moments. I learned so much from Lupe and Common and Kanye. Common has always been my favorite MC because of the way he spoke about my home as I was living it, the same bus route that I ride. But you know what? On a real note, the eras and time are less significant to me than like inspiration and creativity. I feel like I would have been a creative born at any point in time through any medium. I think creativity is a well that we just tap into. So I think of it as my communion with God, the universe, the infinite, whatever you call it. And it's so much deeper to me than the blogs. You know what I mean? Like that's a small thing to me. I view this as being like a spiritual purpose and necessity for me, that is beyond a time, a space, other people. This is just me as a soul, as a spirit. This is how I express my purpose. Well, I think we have many similarities in that we as Black people in America and Black people in Ghana and of the globe all experience a lot of the same phenomena. You know, we are all exploited. We all find ways to transmute that pain into beautiful art and song and dance and spirit. And that is true of us here and there. I think some of the differences are the pervasive aura of fear that dictates much of our experience in America. Doesn't exist in the same way in Ghana. You're not constantly in a fight or flight mode thinking, will I be killed or drawn to kill today? Our people have more respect for each other's lives in Ghana particularly. It's like a joke amongst us in Ghana that even the armed robbers in Ghana, they still don't want to shoot you. Because they can't really fathom to kill another Ghanaian person, you know? It's just not the same. And I think that that's something that obviously has been deeply impacted by the unique circumstances of centuries of brutality that we've experienced here that have been different there. The oppression has spanned the ocean and the continents, but there's a very particular set of circumstances that come with being Black in America, for sure. And I don't think that that's things that we can't acknowledge and work through, though, you know? And above all, I try to say our similarities are more significant than our differences. 500 years is a drop of water in a vast ocean of eternity as an African person. So when we start to feel that, oh, we're not African, Africans don't accept us, or Africans feeling like Black Americans, they're not like us, it's all confusion. Because at the end of the day, we're all African people. This last 500 years has not changed that, you know? It's changed things, but we are still one people. First time I directly dealt with incarceration was when I was 11. And I believe that's the age when innocence is lost upon many Black children in America particularly. And you stop being a kid and begin being a threat. And I could feel that viscerally, you know. even before being arrested for the first time. But that was that age, you know, and I was outside of the school and a police officer was sitting there and he was like, come over here. So I went over there, I had my hand in my hoodie, and he was like, take your hand out your hoodie before I punch you in the fucking face. And I'm like, damn, I'm 11, you know? And it didn't even occur to me that he could be thinking I had a gun in my hoodie, because I was 11 years old. I never had like considered having a gun or had any way to get one. But I think that's just an example of the police state. That's not incarceration in particular, but it was in that same year when I probably first got arrested, and, you know, they have school resource officers, which I think is an interesting verbiage, because what we lack is resources, and they give us resource officers instead. And they arrested me in the school in that same year. And so it was a complex experience, because on one hand, a lot of things started to make sense to me. Hip hop started to make a lot more sense to me. NWA started to make a lot more sense to me. I was like, yeah, fuck the police. And on the other hand, I was like both upset and emboldened by it. I think I felt like, okay, if I'm this threat to you, let me embody that. Let me be that then, if this is what you think of me, you know? And I feel like that's my first consciousness of police state, the impacts of incarceration. Yeah, the album cover is painted by an amazing artist in Chicago named Tehran Kupasoros, originally from Virginia. And I gave him this concept of the legend of Osiris. And originally I was being very literal too. I'm like, paint me as a pharaoh, nigga. You know, like that Nas album cover where he's like, but I love the way that he took that inspiration, made it human, and made it subtle and nuanced. So in the album cover, there is a sarcophagus in the cut that you have to kind of peer through each side of your eye to find. And the pieces of my body are ripped apart, but not in a gory way, in more of like an allegorical way, you know? And I'm being stitched together by these doves. And it really just represents me putting the pieces of myself back together with help. When I'm speaking about Egyptian mythology in the album, I was really inspired to do that by one of my OGs who's been incarcerated since the 90s. And he taught me about the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I had read a book list from Tupac in the past where he listed that as being a book he loved, but I never actually read it. Then my big homie, who's one of the most brilliant writers, poets, theorists I know, that's been incarcerated for decades, put me on, he taught me about it. And when I was combing through it, I came across the story of Osiris. And he was 28 when he was lowered into his own sarcophagus and ripped apart. Pieces of his body spread across the planet and then stitched back together to become the Lord of the afterlife. And I was 28 at the time, learning about that, making this album. And I was super inspired by that. I felt that there was analogy beyond just the age, but the circumstance. I think that coming into the music industry, we bring everything we experienced prior to with us. So we bring our talent and we bring our inspiration and our influence, but we also bring our insecurities, we bring our fears, we bring every crack that's in our armor. And those things are all under a magnifying glass. And so I likened Osiris being lured into his sarcophagus to myself being just lured into a super toxic, self-destructive behavior pattern, be it in drugs or alcohol or even the things I'm making music about. Because I'm watching how the industry moves and I'm like, okay, that's what is successful, you know, like being disrespectful, that's what sells. So I love that story, and the way that it ends with Osiris still being held up and exalted as like a powerful figure in Egyptian mythology gave me a lot of inspiration. Your actual question though was the spark of a spiritual awakening for me, and I think that that's similar. It's in a moment of rock bottom. I mean, I was down pretty bad when I was in the mosque for the first time in prayer, and the imam was giving a khutbah, that's like the sermon, and he was saying there's two types of people in this world. Those that are on their deen, they got good relationships, good momentum, they have things figured out, and those that are struggling with violence in the streets, struggling with addiction, struggling with mental health, struggling financially, struggling interpersonally. And I was struggling with all those things at the time. I had people trying to kill me, and you know, money was fucked up. I was feeling blockages creatively, and I just, in that moment, recognized that it would have to be a larger cosmic order to rectify this situation for me. And so that was my first real conversation with a God, whatever you believe of that, because I'm coming from an African spiritual system. I pray to my ancestors as well. But in that moment, I knew I needed all of them. You know what I mean? I needed God, Allah, my ancestors. Jesus, come help me too. Shit, I'm take what I could get. And yeah, that conversation was the moment of my spiritual awakening in many ways. And then I got in a bad car accident the next week. And I would have been incarcerated for real if I had to pay the consequences of that. So that's when things changed for me. I went sober. That's helped a lot. I don't think that the basis of the things that I've dealt with are rooted in alcohol or drugs. All those things are Band-Aids. That's how we run away from what we feel. And I think it's a cataclysmic shift for me, however, because the pattern is changed from running away to what I feel in self-destructive and damaging ways that hurt myself and my loved ones and people I don't know, to facing it all head on, you know, in strength and gaining the strength that comes with facing fear, you know, with challenging emotions and challenging situations. Islam also, though, has been hugely impactful for me in understanding that there's a system of like spiritual currency almost. And a lot of us feel like if we do something for someone, they don't appreciate it or reciprocate it, that it's about them. Islam has taught me that my spirit of giving, you know, that I might just hit the dude outside with a honcho right now, ain't because I'm needing the validation from a human being. I'm looking for validation from God, you know, and Islam has given me a real key into that. I never used to stop to help somebody pushing a car when it's raining outside, you know, by the side of the road, on the highway. I never would have thought about doing something like that. And once I start practicing Islam, I realized that those type of actions, especially when no one's looking, are an investment in the bank of the divine. And you invest in that bank, and the returns, the interest, it's massive, you know? Yeah, man. Blue Eyes is a song that is dedicated to my auntie Elizabeth, who recently passed away from skin cancer and had some skin bleaching in her past. And when I learned of that, it was so impactful for me because just is a heavy idea that the psychological warfare we endure and have endured as African people is so potent that it can lead us to destroy the very thing that protects us from the sun, you know? And in that moment, the only thing I could really do positive with that is to make a beam of light from it. And so I took that inspiration to make the song Blue Eyes and discuss my own childhood and lifelong reckoning with European beauty standards in the context of my aunt and in the context of our people at large. And the crowning piece of wisdom or understanding to be taken from it is the immense value in our ancestry, that our culture is where our power lies, is one of the last lines of the song. And we just gotta constantly remind ourselves of that, because all of the propaganda will tell us the opposite. You know, everybody wanna be a nigga, but don't nobody wanna be a nigga. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we don't even discuss these days, oftentimes, the insanity of like the beauty standards in our society and culture. How people literally change their bodies to emulate black women, but disrespect and denigrate black women at the same time. It's very convoluted. And this is a song, it doesn't need to go into all that. That's more so just a message of my personal experience, my family experience in the larger context of recognizing black as beautiful. I never had mental stability to start with. I was, you know, experiencing suicidal depression when I was 5 years old. I think I'm in the state of the most mental stability I've been in now. And that's been due in part to a lot of meditation, a pivot away from Western medicine, because I've been medicated from probably age 15 on most antidepressants, probably 10 to 15 medicines over a span of about 13 years. And yeah, so I wouldn't say that I was coming from a space of mental stability. That's something that I've had to build. And you know, sometimes I think that being a black person in America, it's almost like we're not beginning at equilibrium, you know, because we're beginning with this inherited trauma and this ever-present attack on our mental stability. And you can interpret that shit as a baby before you have words, you know, and I know that I did. And yeah, I feel like that's an individual path for each of us to strive towards that, because the world don't want us to have that, you know. And it's also a major blessing for anybody that can achieve that. I think it's more miraculous that any black person who doesn't snap and just lash out is a miracle, you know, because with all the things that we interpret on a daily basis and all of the attacks upon us psychologically, it takes a lot of strength.